fancy clock
Yeah.
somewhere that
It can
runs
never be
time.
wrong.
Well, everybody's got a phone at the
See?
same time, though. I mean, in that time
Yes.
zone.
Oh. 6:30 PM, February 5th, 2020. I'd like to call tonight's session of the City of Delaware Planning Commission to order. Could the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Badger.
Here.
Mr. Halter.
Here.
Mr. Prawl.
Here.
Mr. Volnick.
Here.
Mayor Riggle. Here. Vice Chairman Mansoris.
Here.
Chairman Simpson.
Here. Next item on the agenda, the approval of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on January 15th, 2020, as recorded and transcribed. What's the wish of the commission this evening?
I move for approval of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on January 15th, 2020. As
Second.
recorded and transcribed. Now,
Motion by Mr. Halter, second by Mr. Batcher.
Mr. Badger.
Yes.
Mr. Halter.
yes.
Mr. Prawl.
Yes.
Mr. Volnick.
Yes.
Mayor Riggle. Yes. Vice Chairman Mansoris.
Yes.
Chairman Simpson.
Yes. All right, moving along to item 3 on our lengthy agenda tonight, regular business. Could the clerk please read item A into the record?
Item A, case 2020-0010, a request by K2 Development for approval of a combined preliminary and final development plan at Glenwood Commons Shopping Center for an approximate 96,100 square foot retail building located at 1180 Sunbury Road in Zone B3 PMU, Community Business District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on 14.198 acres.
Okay.
Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, it's Glenwood Commons.
Hey, Lance, just, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd just say a couple words by way of introduction and let Lance present the staff report. Obviously, I think the applicant handed us tonight some revised elevations. We've been working closely with them through last Friday to get the package buttoned up, and our staff recommendations will report out to you in time for distribution for the meeting tonight. And I would just say that I think, it's been a long time coming. Zaremba started this process a long time ago and opened, unfortunately for them, the center right about when the Great Recession was beginning. Unfortunate timing, difficult. And so we're lucky that the center's been, I think, as successful as it has, that we ended up getting the anchor tenants in Kohl's and Meijer. Unfortunately, Home Depot didn't build, and it was my understanding they ended up, they really loved this location. Obviously, they bought the property, but they understood that they might hurt their Orange Township store because apparently a lot of receipts come from here. Too badly, which is sort of your you're darned if you do, darned if you don't kind of thing. They had to make, of course, Home Depot was going through some corporate things at that time, as was a lot of corporate America. So they ended up not building, and the big vacancy with an anchor tenant hasn't helped the center. So we're appreciative of the applicant come forward and wanting to build here. Sometimes it's the case where the community looks at the names above the doors, and we're very excited. And sometimes it's the case, they look at the names above the doors, as we know, and they're upset. As far as staff is concerned, we are agnostic to the name above the door in our work, as you know, and our recommendations are, particularly with respect to design, are relative to the center and what's been built, and how do we look at Kohl's and Myers and Canes that we just approved, and some other developments that are coming in the area shortly, next month to you in all likelihood, and apartments across the street, et cetera, and be consistent. I think in a quick glance, and thank you, Mr. Paul, for the use of your glasses at these renderings, that these are indeed better than the ones that were in your packet and address a number of our issues, with the exception of two things, the white ephes still, and on the western elevation in particular, the use of a form liner rather than face brick, in this case embedded face brick, which is a new application for us as a community, but I think as staff we're comfortable recommending that application to you. It could be quick brick, it could be real brick, it could be lots of things like that. But a form liner is just one of those elements that we typically reserve for, bridge abutments and those sorts of things, as a commission as well. But all that aside, I think the names on these doors will be exciting to our community, from what I hear and what the internet seems to say. And that's great, and it'll be good for the center, and we appreciate the look of Delaware, and I hope and I believe that we can button up these design elements. I don't think it's going to make or break their project, although I appreciate what they would prefer to do, and we're interested to hear what your comments might be. But overall, I think it's a good thing for the center. Lance, do you want to go through the
I can.
overall presentation?
As Dave indicated, it's the former Home Depot site, about just over 14 acres. Back in '08, they built most of the infrastructure out here. This is the missing tooth, if you will, between the two buildings. From a zoning perspective, this site would need a combined preliminary and final development plan approval. There is a future phase that's outlined here that they're not identifying at this point, but something larger could go, another tenant could go on this structure. That would have to come in for separate preliminary and final development plan approval. From an engineering perspective, our engineering department's reviewing the construction drawings for this as we speak. As I indicated, the majority of the parking lot, all the infrastructure, utilities and like were built to this. They just have to extend them to this site. So it's fairly straightforward. From a roadway and access perspective, the access will remain as is. It is today. The only thing that we request is that the parking lot may need seal coated, brought up to grade where appropriate, and parking spaces restriped and the like for our city engineering requirements. From the site plan configuration, the 96,100 square foot center, the Hobby Lobby would be on the western portion of the site, be about 55,000 square feet. 5 below would be next to that, be about 8,500 square feet. Ultra Beauty would be next to that, it'd be right around 10,500 square feet, and the TGA Max would be at the eastern portion of this building, it'd be about 22,000 square feet. And as I indicated, they could add another tenant to the eastern portion of the site at a future time. The existing parking that was approved for this entire development back in 2008, this development would meet the parking for this site would be appropriate. The Hobby Lobby here and the TJ Maxx here would have a loading dock on the rear of the site, where the other two wouldn't. There also would be dumpsters in the rear of the building and the other typical things in the rear of the building. And the access road would be in this location, and obviously there's a large mound there separating that from the apartments to the rear, the Quopass Apartments that was constructed back then. From a landscaping and screening perspective, most of the interior parking lot landscaping and perimeter landscaping were installed. They would have to install foundation landscaping and replace any of the old trees and mulch and the like in this area that would need required in the parking lot area. From a lighting perspective, all the light poles were installed out in the parking area. They are providing building lights and the like in the rear of the building, and that plan would have to meet our minimum engineering and illumination requirements for that. Signage, there was no signage in this application. A comprehensive sign plan was approved for this development back in 2008. Each individual tenant would be responsible to submit for their signage, and would have to achieve compliance with the previously approved sign plan. This is the building elevation that they submitted for the packet. Obviously, you have a new one in front of you. I think they're fairly similar. I think the 11 by 17 you have in front of you is a little better quality than how this came out on our large screen here. In general, the front of the building would be what they're calling a precast concrete panel with embedded clay masonry units. This over here are this elevation, or this material board to to the left identifies what that would look like in other applications throughout the country. We think that looks pretty nice. The side and rear elevations, they're proposing a precast concrete panel form liner. And they gave us an example of this is what it would look like. We're concerned of that on the side elevations. I think the rear elevations, because of the mounting and everything, you can't see it from Mill Run Crossing, but side elevations, you would. Mostly on the elevation next to where the roundabout comes into the site, you'd have a lot of public entering there. And the Office Depot to the east of this, or the west of this site, they were required to upgrade their side elevations and light because that's the entrance. So that's one of the requests that we have. So in general, it looks fairly well, but there are a few, I think there's five important critical design elements that we think need upgraded. The wainscoting and columns on the building need to be Delaware blue vein as opposed to what they're proposing, and they agreed with that. They're good with that. The decorative ephes cornice with metal coping on the Hobby Lobby should be extended to the other three buildings in at least a stepped pattern, and I think they agreed to that verbally over the phone last week. The third item is the western elevation of the Hobby Lobby shall be upgraded to the precast panel with embedded clay masonry with wainscoting and pilasters to better match the adjacent Office Depot. That's what I just discussed. The fourth item is the ephes on the TJ Maxx shall be revised from a proposed china white to a beige color to better match the other buildings and conform with the other buildings within the development. Also, the amount of ephes should be reduced to be consistent with the other ephes areas in the sign band on these buildings and the other buildings on the site. Then the eastern side elevation of TJ Maxx shall be precast concrete panel with embedded clay masonry to match the front of the elevations. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval with 15 conditions, and those 5 items that I indicated for the building elevations are included in those conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm a little confused about the embedded clay on the eastern side of TJ Maxx. If there's a building going to go in the future, why go to that extent?
It's a good question, and I had a quick conversation with the developer last week about that. At this time, they're not 100% sure that they're going to have a use, but they could. So without knowledge that they will, we're being a little conservative and think they should upgrade it to.
So they have a choice, either find somebody else or do it.
Well, we agree, and that was part of the conversation we had with them. If you're going to have a future building here, then don't make the side of the building fancier than is necessary. Wait till you have the actual side that will face the public, the public could see. But just don't know on the expansion yet. They showed it on there, it's demonstrated that it could fit on there. They may end up getting a tenant and bring it back in. I think on that side of the elevation, these revised elevations they've provided where they've wrapped the corner, because you're kind of going down the side of Myers and the stream there, and it's definitely not as public as the main access aisle on the other side. And then the form liner with the brick, and I see the example in here, and I'm sure they want to talk about that application, so and that'd be fine. We can talk about it a little bit here, but I think that makes more sense than where we were with the previous elevations as well, with respect to the east side. And that's not really, they're still showing the form liner on this side of the building, so that could work, and they get an expansion to the building, 12,000 square feet in the future, and then they'll kind of have to take it down the side of that building a little bit at that time. But the west side is the one of probably most concern for us as staff, just because you can stand there and you can look at the Office Max and you look at designs, and then you look at the first version of these, and it's clearly it was missing some elements. I think this brings the column elements back, and then We really just got to talk about what they mean by form liner. Is it form liner with a brick stamp and colored like a brick, or is it form liner with a piece of face brick stuck in it, kind of like in the front, just to keep it simple term. I think the latter is probably more what we would recommend. Or quick brick, it doesn't have to be, I mean, that's the method of construction that they would prefer. The rest of the center is quick brick. So it's an integral wall system, it's just the way they prefer to build this. And some of the materials are changing, certainly since the center originally opened. We'll grant you that as well, including this, this face brick embedded in the concrete wall is at least new to us. It's not a completely new technology, but those are the things we want to talk about. But I think these revised elevations with respect to the east side, Mr. Badger, I think we'd be pretty comfortable with the way they're showing it on these revisions. Now that we can see that this is wrapped around the side of the building like that. From a staff perspective, obviously, it's up to you to make a recommendation to city council at the end of the day. The one element I know is maybe hard for them because they have to go back to these tenants, but there's just literally no white ephes out there at this center. So I don't know how I could amend that position. But I think what they've done with the front of TJ Maxx is definitely in keeping with some of our comments and even Alta, and I think that pulls those column elements, and the width and the height of it doesn't strike me as an issue anymore. It's really just probably the color. Again, subject to your discussion.
Do we have any additional questions for staff?
Is there any additional light at Glen and 3637, Glen Road 3637? As far as putting in a light there, and the poles are there, would this change?
So you're
speed
asking
that up?
traffic signal?
Yeah, the traffic signal.
I do not have that information at this time, but I would be pleased to look into that for you.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward to the podium. You could just state your names and addresses for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mark Drain. I'm with Rogvoy Architects. My address is 32500 Telegraph Road, Suite 250, Bingham Farms, Michigan.
Good evening, Chris Krastofsky, K2 Retail Development, 11363 Winterberry Drive, Plain City, Ohio. I'm officially an Ohio resident.
You are,
Yeah, I am.
okay, congratulations.
Well, I've heard loud and clear what the planners had to say about materials, and I would like to give us an opportunity to maybe present our case that form liner isn't a bridge abutment. So if you guys could switch or go to your page 2 or page 3, you'll see this image right here. This image right here, that's what the form liner is. And it really comes down to cost. I mean, it's quite an upgrade to go with the brick embed. This is our brick embed here. The idea was that our form liner, you stain the face of the brick, and the mortar joint stays the color of mortar, so it looks like brick. I can't tell the difference, but our idea was that wherever a customer could touch and feel this up front, facing the roadway, we wanted to do the brick embed, which is this material right here. Sides of the buildings, and I do understand that Office Depot, they did the quick brick, and I understand there's pilasters, and but I'm suggesting that if we come back on our side elevation, this is the west that faces the office.
Yeah.
To come in with the new bluestone, the new pilasters, with traditional cornice caps, and then I guess probably what was really missing on our rendering is that there's a row of landscaping there. There's a buffer there, and that, you know, the visual impact of that wall is gonna be softened by the landscape material. And what we wanted to do was on the very corner where you go towards the roundabout, do a series of pilasters with the bluestone, continuing with the form liner, but create an element on the corner to be able to present that to customers that come into the shopping center from the roundabout. We wanted to do the same thing on the TJ Maxx corner facing the Meyer sidewall. On your second page, you'll see that we wanted to return the brick embed and put a pilaster to create a corner feature, similar to the way the Myers has the stone. They have a section of stone above their low. I think that might be their compressor area. Create an element there. We've done what the planners have suggested about putting the more detailed cornice on all the elevations. If you look at the TJ Maxx, we lowered the shoulders, added stone. We put the more subdued color Dryvit ethos on the shoulder portions, the lower shoulder portions. We wanted to keep the white, so I'm gonna ask that we can continue to do so. If you looked at the Kohl's, all the Kohl's entryways, their archways and canopies, those are white, and there are also white cornices on the shopping center to its west. There are white elements there. I'm not saying that, you'll agree to this, but there are white elements out there. Ulta, which is a cosmetic store, they would want their store all white if I could get it all white. But what we've done here is we've reduced the massive white, and we're trying to have these tenants have some of their trade dress and still be compatible architecturally with the rest of the center. And again, with the Kohl's white entryways and some of the other white elements on the other shopping center, I think that we've become compatible. We have no problem using the stone that was suggested. I like that idea. So I guess we can have that discussion, or maybe I'd like to go through some of the conditions, because there's some things that I'm not comfortable with. If I go through these conditions, we have no problems with number 1. We have no problems with number, well, we do have a problem with number 2. We've seal coated parking lots in the past, and they're good for about a couple years, and then they look bad, and they have to get redone. I think that the parking lot surface is in good enough shape. It talks about brought up to grade. There are some wearing courses that weren't put on. We're happy to put that wearing course back on a course. So I think we're just asking for just a huge maintenance problem. That parking lot hasn't been used ever. I think once cars get driven on it, I think it'll start being more malleable and start knitting together better. We have no problems with number 3. Number 4, I think we've just discussed about adding the cornice. Western elevation, I would prefer to use the form liner. I don't think everybody understands that retail bricks and mortar business, no pun intended, isn't what it used to be. Deep discounters are the ones who are in the market doing these ground up buildings. And basically they're paying very low rents. And when I start adding money to the project, I start, reducing the return on investment, and maybe even to the point where it wouldn't be worth doing. So I think we should consider some of the economics here. We talked about the eastern side of TJ Maxx. That's facing that drainage swale, and it also faces the side of the Meyer. I think, plus we might, again, have another building there. And in my opinion, the distance from where you view this building, the form liner product on that page 3, I think is a very attractive product. So I would like you to consider allowing us to use the form liners on the sides. We have no problems with painting all the copings and downspouts and whatever's on the back of the building to match the building. All the rooftop equipment will be screened by the parapets. We've submitted our proposal, number 10, for what we would like to do. Dumpsters will certainly be compatible with the buildings. Lighting plan, I think the lighting plan was provided in a package. If you guys want to take a look at that, make sure that it complies. The only lights we're adding are wall packs in the back. So I think that our photometric plan is compatible with your zoning ordinance. As far as the landscaping in the parking lots, we're happy to replace anything that's dead or dying. We're certainly going to spruce up the mulch and trim the trees. Obviously, they've been sitting there for a long time, but I don't want to, in kind, just take everything out and put new stuff in, because I think what's there is appropriate. We have no problem submitting for sign permits when it's appropriate, and we will definitely bring the new tenant in when we have that tenant.
Okay, so in summary, please correct me if I'm wrong, you would like to further debate number 2, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7, and you're okay with the balance of the staff recommendations? I just want to make sure that I've got this right.
Okay, let's go with number 2. What was the next one?
2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 were the ones I circled as things that you'd like to
Correct.
discuss. Okay. So going back to number 2, parking lot shall need to be seal coated, brought up to grade where needed, and the parking spaces restriped per the engineering requirements. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these would be things that would also be commented on during the plan review from the city, correct?
Yeah, they normally would be. I think it's really seal coating is what he's talking about, not
Okay.
wanting to do that, and I defer to Carrie in that regard, and the engineer, that.
Yeah, I mean, I know for fairly certain that the wearing course needs to be applied to the entire parking lot. So that would have to occur first. I agree that.
It's definitely in the drive aisle there. We've gotten complaints about that.
No, I think what Carrie just said is that there is no wearing course.
That is my understanding. I mean, I can look into it and
Okay, I
further
believe
vet
that.
it out.
No, I think there is.
There's
I
wearing
think
course
it's-
up until the main driveway, because I think they didn't want to put the wearing course in when we build the buildings, they would tear up that portion up. So,
But the parking lot's intact.
What I would advise is
Do
that
we
it'll be addressed through plan review. If no wearing course is present, then it will need to be applied. If it's there
Sure.
and it's in poor condition, then it'll need to be discussed. There's the opportunity that, if you're worried about seal coating, what we do on our public roadways is a rejuvenate application, which could be considered, but typically we don't do that on private parking lots. Does that address the concern from me?
I think the intent of the condition was to meet the engineering requirements and
Okay.
upgrade it, make it look, you're putting a new building in.
I'm not
so
sure
parking
any of
lot
us
looks
have
appropriate.
issues with the condition. That was a question to you guys.
Yeah, if the wearing course isn't there, then there's, to my mind, there's no doubt it needs applied.
Okay.
And why do we need 2? Why can't we just leave that under number 1?
Well, we have had, I could tell you, we've had specific complaints with respect to the, not having the wearing course on the drive aisle, because people were using it to go from one side to the other, and you go over a bump, and then we had some people that were, I think, in wheelchairs or otherwise, trying to traverse it that way, and it was an issue for them, and so I think Zaremba, before you guys came along, at least put little
Yeah.
ramps or whatever from, so that it wasn't just a bump, but it wasn't the whole wearing course. So, and I defer to them with respect to the parking lot. I agree with Carrie. It's part of typical plan review. If we go out there and wearing course is not out there, you're gonna have to do that. If it is in bad condition, it doesn't seem like it's in bad condition to me, but I'm not an engineer.
Yeah, typically, empty
Been out
lot
there for
sitting
a
there
while.
not being driven on is gonna be in poorer condition than something that's been driven on many times over and over again. You
Yeah.
just need that, the oil and rubber and everything, it actually does treat the asphalt surface to be in better condition. So you could revise item 2, condition 2, or leave it perhaps a revision would be appropriate. But I would support it standing alone as its own condition.
Okay.
We're looking at revising.
Well, does the conversation bring any extra level of comfort?
So we're just gonna pretty much just come to a conclusion after the fact, review it, make sure that it's acceptable or not acceptable, and we'll just table it pretty much to decide at a later time whether we're gonna have to add a wear course or mill and repave it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we're gonna remove that number 2 if we decide to,
Or revise it. Or revise it.
or revise it.
Mhm.
Yeah, right now it says it shall be seal coated.
Right. It could be revised to say, yep,
Shall.
Per the
shall
That's
meet,
the problem I have with it.
shall meet Cary standards. Or, shall meet engineering requirements for pavement.
Would it be
or-
okay?
Mike Nykerk with Nykerk Engineering, I'm the civil engineer for the project, 306 North Market, Mount Carmel, Illinois. Could I suggest that we remove the requirement for seal coating? So we absolutely have no problem with adding the wearing course, which I believe is just up around the building and behind the building. It's my opinion that the wearing course has been applied throughout the parking lot, but we can revisit that as well. I think our issue is with seal coating the entire parking lot.
Commissioners and applicant, this is why we typically don't have this technical level. You're going to go through a planning and zoning permit process
Sure.
regardless of if you want to or not. And we're
course.
gonna tell you gotta do some things. And you're gonna go through a site engineering review process, so they're gonna tell you gotta do some things. And that happens kinda outside of this process. In part, we have that sort of catch-all phrase in number 1, which can also work the other way, where it's so general that sometimes things catch an applicant by surprise. And so we felt that these items were ones that made sense to be brought forward on their own. If you want to change shall to something else, it'd leave the parking lot shall be brought up per engineering requirements
That sounds good to me.
Mhm.
to include,
Can we-
possibly seal coating brought up to grade where necessary and parking spaces restriped. I think it's just reworking the sentence. Would that be all right, Carrie, with you?
But the parking spaces would still be restriped? Are they already striped?
Yeah, I mean, if it's necessary, I mean, the parking lot, I mean, I went out there, I was actually really happy of the condition of the parking lot, because again, it sits out in the middle of nowhere, so nobody's been parking there. If somebody wants to go to Myers, they go to Myers and park in front of Myers, they park in front of Kohl's. So, that thing's just been sitting there, not being abused by vehicles.
It needs to be restriped. You can't.
Does it? So yes, look, and again, let's, obviously put that comment in there, because I do have a obligation to these tenants. These tenants are national tenants. They want the parking lot to look nice. So, I do get a lot of requirements through our leases that we have to give them an acceptable hazard-free parking lot. So it's not like we're gonna just leave potholes and it's just gonna be decayed parking lot. If that's the case, then we're gonna have to obviously repair it or, obviously remill it, so.
Okay.
So I guess the wording is fine, is how, per engineer.
You could say improvements shall be made to the parking area and drive aisles as found necessary by the Public Works Department or engineering plan review.
From a process standpoint, just remind me, Dave, if we would want to change the wording, what's the process for the commission this evening?
I think you'd make a formal motion, item by item.
Item by
In this
item?
case,
Okay,
is gonna be just easier, I
sure,
think.
understood.
see where you sit, and then move on to the next item, or else it's gonna get very confusing if you try to do it all at once.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well.
I'm hearing general agreement maybe on two with the applicant. Maybe we don't have to futz around with the language on the fly here, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think we know what we're talking about.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You may still want to change it, but
No. so
seems
then
like
I-
the others might be a little more difficult.
No, absolutely. So what I'm hearing is we're okay with the wording on two. I mean, you guys understand
Well,
that you'll just be expected to
As
bring
long
it
as
up.
we're not asphalt, or sealing the asphalt.
As long as you're
Yeah.
not sealing the asphalt. So what I'm hearing is they would like the verbiage changed to make sure that they're not required to seal the asphalt.
But if the engineer's department tell them it is, then it'll have to be done,
Yes.
Yes.
so.
I just, like he said, it's gonna be a maintenance issue. I mean, it's,
I think we just take out the shall not be seal coated and just leave it, the parking lot should be brought up to grade where needed, parking spaces restriped per engineering requirements.
I think that'd be fine in
That's right.
combination with number one. They're still going to perform their
Yep.
review.
sure.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Badger, second by Mr. Halter.
Motion's to remove the words,
Shall need to be seal coated.
or at least seal coated, I think. So it would still be, shall need to be brought up to grade where needed, and the parking spaces restriped per the engineer's requirements. So
Yes.
just delete seal coated.
All right. So Mr. Badger and then
Yes.
Mr. Halter, second,
Oh.
correct? Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thought you were calling
Mr.
roll.
Badger,
Yes.
Mr. Halter,
Yes.
Mr. Prohl,
Yes.
Mr. Volnek,
Yes.
Mayor Riggle,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour.
Yes.
Chairman Simpson.
Yes. Okay, so the next item I had was number 4, decorative ephes cornice with metal coping on Hobby Lobby building shall be extended in at least a stepped cornice form to the TJ Maxx, Ulta Beauty, and Five Below buildings.
We have no problem. with
No
that.
issues.
Oh, you don't have
No.
issues?
Right.
Okay.
No.
Other than when
I think you did that on the revised.
Yes,
we did
yeah,
that on
we
the
did,
first one.
yep.
Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect. Number 5, western elevation of Hobby Lobby building shall be upgraded to precast concrete panels with embedded clay masonry with wainscoting and pilasters that would be Delaware blue vein or equivalent in color. So the concern there, if I'm not mistaken, was you want to use the form liner there in lieu of embedded brick.
Correct.
Okay. So then,
I would like to say that the very first corner, where we return to the pilaster on the side, that would be the clay liner, or the clay embed. But everything from, on the west elevation, from the first pilaster on the left-hand side, all the way down, would be the form liner, but we would be adding the additional pilasters in the corner feature, at the corner that faces the roundabout. So I'm putting 3 pilasters together to form an architectural element. And if you, and again, I love this picture on page 3, that our form liner looks like brick.
You cannot tell the difference unless you go up to, get out of your car, go up there and literally put your hands on it. It's an optical illusion. We've done it before. I just want to express, and by no means am I trying to manipulate the city or try to force any, you know, I'm a preferred developer for Hobby and TJ's, so I go all over the place for them. But again, the struggles that we have today in today's retail is that the tenants have a specific cost per square foot that they need to stick to be obviously profitable, and as cost. So it's as a developer, it's fairly cut and dry. Investors look for IRR, 10% or more. Us, if, you know, it's 2 numbers. It's rents, base costs. And literally, we're trying to compromise. I don't want to put a wall up, but a form liner saves us 1/3 of the cost. So it's just a lot of areas within here that we have to do to cut the cost to make this development actually even surreal. I mean, it's very, very difficult. And there's not too many, I think I'm maybe a handful of developers that are even doing ground-up developments these days. Unless there's obviously incentives, TIFs, NCAs or anything, and the way it looks, I don't even think it's gonna be successful. We've been trying to see if we can get an NCA here, but there's already an NCA intact, and, I mean, it's really kind of, doesn't look too promising that we're even gonna get anything, so we're really, really trying to limit our exposure on this, or our investor's gonna walk away and we're done. I mean, and we literally have until March 6th, because that's our closing date on the property. And May is our start for this development, that we have to figure out where we're gonna go. Now, adding this embedded brick and taking it to the sides, and on even the other side, and I'm gonna assure you one thing, that expansion is going to happen, and it's gonna happen relatively quickly, right after this center opens. We already have a lot of interested tenants, but again, the majority of them wanna see how the two anchors do. And we will not have no issues. We need that other tenant actually, for us to be able, actually even put us over that edge, to be able to actually have it a very successful development. So we need that 12,000 to, even something possibly, I think we were able to fit like maybe another 20,000 if we wanted to. I think it's something like that. So we do have some big players that are willing to do it, but they want to see what the two do first, and then, we'll talk. So that's going to happen, and we're going to push for it to happen.
What's the thickness of the form liner example, and is that just concrete behind it, looking at this picture?
It's a precast, 10-inch wall with 4-inch insulation. It's an engineered wall. I mean, we use it primarily because, one, in the northern states, especially, you can see now, I mean, our winters are just getting screwy. And it's really affecting us going conventional. So we're already paying a premium doing the precast, but it's a much better product, and it's a very efficient and quick product. I mean, we can spend a lot of time prepping the site, getting this ready. I mean, we can go all the way to sidewalks and get this thing ready, and crane assembly comes, semis come rolling in, and they have this building up in 10 days.
And then you just stain it, whatever
No,
color?
it's already done.
It's already done.
It's all in the factory.
So it is a stain on the brick?
It's
not a-
baked, it's a very good product.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not the same color all the way through. If you cut that, the brick is not the same color all the way
Well,
through?
there's two different products in the building. There's gonna be brick, a thin brick like this, it's embedded into the concrete panel. So what you'll see.
That's on the front?
That's in the front.
That's on
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
On the side. So
I have
what-
no problem.
On
I'm
the
talking
side, what
about-
they do is that when they pour the concrete panel, there's a plastic liner that looks like brick. So when they pour the panel and they take the form liner off, it has a brick texture on it. So what they do is they go and they roll the face of the concrete with the stain that matches this brick. So only the face of that brick pattern is stained. The concrete that's behind it, maybe it's a quarter-inch behind it.
Quarter-inch.
Remains the concrete or the mortar color. So when you look at page 3 here, you can see that the face of the brick is brick color and the mortar joints are mortar joint color.
So
And there is an actual texture to it.
Yeah, there is an indent too. It's like you think that it's
I have no
brick.
problem. I'm just saying is, it is a stain on the brick.
It is,
It
it's a
is,
stain on the
correct,
concrete.
yes.
Like on the concrete,
Yes, stained.
which is
yes.
done there, and over a period of years, will that fade? Do we, I mean, I don't know, I'm just asking.
It'll pro-
And I'll tell you why I'm asking. I remember when one of them was done down here, different process,
Mhm.
it's stuccoed brick. Otherwise, they made the brick on the building out of stucco. Okay, that's a long time ago. And then they take and stain it, and then about 5-6 years later, it looked like crap because the stain, as with any stain, the sun, the weather, and everything else began to change its color and go away. That's what I'm asking about, okay?
No.
I'm not against the product. I'm just long-term,
Long-term, I'm gonna guess it's gonna be touched up every 12 years, but
that's what I wanted. Thank you. Thank
But
you.
again,
That answers
brick
my
fades
question.
too.
well, what we've been finding is the quick brick, and you'll probably see that on the shopping center, and I've noticed it. The pigments in the concrete through all units, they are UV sensitive, and you will see quite a bit of discoloration in the quick brick. I think that if anything, with this, I think I have a better product because it's monolithic and it can be fixed.
Is this a representation of what the brick on the front of the building
Correct.
will look like?
That's the system.
Okay, this
That's
is,
not the color.
This is
Yeah,
the
no,
color.
That's the color.
So again, the form liner is gonna be stained this color, which is a wire cut brick.
okay,
And this is gonna be the actual brick that's gonna be embedded in the concrete panels on front.
okay. Because I think from a design standpoint, I hear what you guys are saying about investment levels and totally respect and understand that. But I think that what I'd be concerned about is when you get into thin brick or this type of brick, there's usually a subtle variation in the brick. Like with this particular sample, you can see there's a subtle variation from unit to unit, which adds a little bit of texture to the building. But when you get in the form liner, it's all going to be stained the same color. So when you have these two finishes next to each other, how's that going to look, I guess is what my question is.
Well, apparently, from what I've observed from the site, the outbuilding, with multiple tenants in it, there's.
The out
not the one-
parcel,
not-
closer to
Yeah.
Sunbury.
Okay.
Verizon.
That has two different colors of brick on it.
Mhm.
There's one that's very monolithic, and there's one that has a variation or
Mhm.
variation of shade. I think it looks fine.
Okay.
I think anybody's ever objected to it here.
Now, I spoke to Kirkster, and he says you'll almost won't tell the difference.
We've been using Endicott clay products for a long time. We like them because they're monolithic,
Mhm.
as monolithic as you can get.
What does the commission think?
I personally have no problem with the stamp, or with their proposal on either end.
I agree with you.
I don't think people are gonna notice it that much. I think the additional pilasters break things up. I just don't see the need to have that kind of requirement.
For me, on the west elevation, it's just as much the landscaping portion to break it up, even though you have the pilasters. To me, that's where I would see a breakup type of thing, is what kind of planting goes in at what height type of thing, since we're talking a long wall height type of thing. So if it's a 3-foot bush, to me, 3-foot bush wouldn't cut it, right? Because it would not do enough to deviate from your look. So for me, it's more the landscaping part, which is usually taken care of,
Well, they
you
show
know,
it
in
on
the,
the-
in the
they
con-
show it
in
on
the-
the
in the
west
development
elevation.
text, and I don't have that. So it's usually, to me, that's, my concern is just the landscaping, not the form liner part.
They show landscaping on the west elevation,
Yes.
To the
Yeah,
best
that's
of
the only one
To the
I-
best of our ability.
but on the east elevation, they're
He's talking
hoping
about
to
the height, I
add
think.
the additional building,
He's
okay?
talking about the height of the,
Height.
Yeah.
height
Yeah.
of these.
Yeah,
Yeah, on the west elevation.
I don't know how
I'm
much
with
room
Mr.
they have
Badger on the
between the
east.
building
I
and the
don't
road,
see
that's gonna determine
an issue
how
on the
high
east.
is how wide it can go at the same time.
Sure, or just really the size of whatever shrubbery is supposed to be in for the, again, I don't have that development tax, so it'd be, I'd say up to staff to say if that's kind of,
Well, our normal buffering requirement would be, and I think it's a good point, Commissioner, would be, 6 foot tall. You're showing evergreen trees here, deciduous,
Those are existing trees.
usually caliper-ants, so.
yeah.
Were you going to add any trees then on that side? I mean, I know there's existing, an existing tree on the other side.
Well, all right, so the image you see on sheet A3 here, the very top image, shows landscape material. That landscape material was put in there when the Home Depot pad was built. Again, looking at this from the perspective of an elevation, it may look sparse, but remember, once you are driving down the roadway and everything's foreshortened as a perspective, these landscape materials become grouped together. And so we thought that what was there was appropriate. If you think that we could add a few more, I guess we could do that. Be glad to meet with the zoning administrator and when we're under construction and maybe put some stakes in the ground, and maybe that's where.
We can put a comment if, like, once everything's done and it's being reviewed, if you feel that it's necessary that we should add some more arbs or evergreens or anything, I mean, I'm okay with that.
Are there evergreens and plantings on the east side of the Office Max building?
I think there's one. It gets pretty tight in there because the Office Max building comes out fairly close to the drive out. There's the mound right when you're coming out of the roundabout.
This is,
That's the side he's talking about.
that's the side he's talking
Quite
about.
a few.
Quite a bit of trees there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there, but the wall is significantly more broken up than what you're talking about with a uniform color and uniform textured form liner approach.
So half the wall you're not even gonna see.
I think the question for me would be to make sure that, do you think you're gonna damage those in construction at all?
No,
or-
that's why we elected, that was one of the other reasons why, precast, we elected to go precast. Precast will limit the damage of site. Hobby, the way they do it is they do their own construction typically, we give them a TI allowance, they come out and they do a tilt-up. And I said, no, we can't do that here because it's an established, our budgets are tight, we don't wanna damage the parking lot, we don't wanna do any of that. So, they agreed to allow us to do the precast. The precast, we can literally have everything done, and it's like a Lego. For 10 days, pop, 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 no damage, no nothing, it's just, they're in and out clean as a whistle. Not even mud on their tires, so.
And I assume this material is already being used on the back of the building, is that correct? Are we doing, is form liner on the back of the building? on the
No,
south
it's all,
elevation?
those were quick brick on the
That's quick
back,
brick
and
as
then
well.
some of them have just block, like Myers has a 20-foot tall mound behind, you can't.
Yes.
You gotta literally go back there to see it. so.
Yep.
In the back, again, in the back where you don't see it from any of the public way,
Don't care.
use
yeah.
wherever you want.
But this is actually, I think, is gonna be exposed to visibility on the road behind,
The
right?
roundabout.
Yeah.
The west side in that corner, I think you've done a nice job with the stone and wrapping the corners around here. I have no issue with that. I still wouldn't fall on the side of form liner for this center, commissioners, but I respect your approach. I would say to move the ball along here, with respect to item 5, if you just wanted to say something like the western elevation shall be per the revised elevation submitted to 520. I think that's consistent with what you've discussed, which does show the form liner and the upgraded corners and the pilasters and that sort of thing. Unless that's not what you. The western number 5, the western elevation shall be per the revised elevation submitted to 520.
So moved.
Second?
Somehow I knew Bob.
Motion by Mr. Badger, a second by Mr. Halter.
Mr. Badger?
Yes?
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle? Yes. Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes. Okay, so moving on to item number 6, I believe this is concerning white ephes versus an ephes color to match the balance of the building.
Yeah, and I think, Commissioner, before you start talking about it, it's behind the TJ Maxx and the Ulta Beauty kind of forming part of their signage, really, in our opinion. I think that's why they really want it. I think we just didn't pick up on the other elevations, and it's shown here again. It's also on the cornice
Yeah,
above
above
5
5
below,
below.
if I'm reading that right. Am I reading that right? or-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 3 places, not just those 2, that are showing white. And with
And
respect to the
it's-
earlier comments and Kohl's
Oh, the
was
5 below.
obviously, is certainly an anchor tenant of this center beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's just unarguable. What they did is they used the stone product, more in keeping with their brand at the time, on the front to create those sort of front entryways of theirs, right there, you see it.
Right.
That was more they had a stone product at the time that they used. I don't know if they use it today in Kohl's or if they're even building new Kohl's anymore. Maybe not.
They're not. They're actually reducing the size.
Maybe
of
not.
them.
And so that I still stand by my statement that while it's whiter, it's not white, it's not China white. It is whiter, but it's sort of a,
Yeah.
it's not quite beige.
And this is-
That's not very, it's an off-white, but it's not that white.
Yeah, China white's not white white.
I'd find it, I do find it, no matter what you decide, it was just from my opinion, it's a little odd to have one cornice white and the rest.
I would agree with that. I would strongly
Okay.
oppose having one
Let's not
cornice.
do that one. Now that I've looked at it, I say,
Okay.
That's the one that doesn't make sense. I can start to understand the branding aspect when you get into some of the other tenants.
and remember too, on the TJ Maxx, we've added the stone pilasters, and then the short, we lowered the shoulders on the side.
Those look great.
And then we
Come on.
made
Yeah.
the shoulders on the side, the darker color.
Yep.
We're
And
trying to put-
TJ's is very happy with it, so they're happy with it, but
I just
the
suggest.
back band of the TJ is
Yeah.
their signature China,
I get it.
China white.
I suggest the commission, that one of the problems with white is that it doesn't stay white.
It doesn't
And
stay
I
white.
mean, it tends to streak black, because you're gonna have water dripping off cornices and stuff. But another approach could be to just limit the white to essentially behind the TJ Maxx letters and behind the Ulta Beauty letters, which is kinda like how they're showing the Five Below sign.
I was gonna say,
And doing the, so they get the white behind their letters, and they,
Bit more
kind of a
outline.
compromise, and the above and below it then could be some form of tan.
Yeah.
It's ephes, so you could cut it and do any of that.
Yeah.
I like that idea,
I was gonna say,
You like that idea?
I do.
We'll present it to the retailers and, hey, I mean, they're paying such a cheap rent, be like, take it or leave it. Don't, you know,
but I would agree with Dave, full ethos white, I would not be in favor of either,
It-
no,
it
we'll
is
just
a
create kind
slightly
of like a
off-white
back band
color,
like
I
the
think.
Five Below.
for the China white.
Yeah, could you just kind of flip that board up again? So the China white is this one.
Ah,
Don't use that brand of adhesive.
Lick and stick, use the wrong stick on
I
there.
always.
no, just
use
be
the,
sure to charge him for the damage on this table, okay?
So the China white is this one, middle row, yes.
It's not super white.
It's not super
No.
white. And then the ephes, I'm just trying to figure out what the neighbor ephes is gonna be, so
The one right
on
next to the
TJ
same.
Maxx, it's the middle one.
Or the far, that one that his finger's on.
Or
That
is it this one right here?
Okay, so they're not incredibly far off.
Ephes 2 is the cornice,
Yep.
Ephes 3 is the,
Eva's 3,
That
yep,
lighter
yep.
color.
So this is it right here.
China
Yeah.
white.
China white.
Just hold up a piece of paper next to it. Up to you, commissioners, for what it's worth, I have no idea how I'd rework these words to accommodate what I just suggested. Other than to say, we might do something generic. You could leave it this way, or as otherwise approved by city staff, and they know what we talked about here tonight. It might be the easiest way, or I can put my head down and rewrite these two sentences.
maybe what we could say is resubmitted by the applicant, because I can have this drawing to you tomorrow.
I would have no problem, I think staff knows what we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, this goes on to
I
council.
agree.
And I don't think you've ever let us down when we said, okay, put something in there that says that you guys will
Work
reach an
with Dave,
agreement
yeah.
with him
Yep.
or with staff, and like I said, I don't think I've ever had, in all the time, a problem with,
Mhm.
staff knows what we want, but it's better than trying to rewrite it on the fly.
Agreed.
We appreciate that sentiment. Thank you.
So I make that motion.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Halter and a second by Mr. Badger. So the wording should be changed to
Just adding.
whatever Dave said.
Yeah, whatever Dave says.
Agreed upon.
I like it.
Very powerful, very powerful.
So it sounds like we can add at the end.
Yeah.
Or as.
Approved by
Approved
staff.
As
An
approved by
agreement
s-
between staff and the applicant.
Correct.
Perfect.
Let them find it out.
Did you get that okay?
Mr. Badger?
Yes?
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes. Okay, and then item number 7 is regarding the brick on the east side of the building.
So, Mr. Chairman, given the revisions here, I would revise that from staff's perspective to simply say the eastern side elevation shall be per the revised elevation submitted to 520.
So moved.
I second it.
So we have a motion by Mr. Badger and a second by Mr. Halter.
Mr. Badger?
Yes?
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes. And if my mathematics are
That's it.
correct, that's it.
One more,
Oh,
13.
Hold on, 13.
The way I read this, it's suggesting to me that staff would like us to replace all the trees and shrubbery in the parking lot?
No, that's the and/or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an and
Yeah.
or.
So we'll repair, replace anything that's bad,
Right.
damage, we'll trim them up if they need to be trimmed,
Right.
new mulch,
Right.
that's fine. Okay.
All right, so, do we have any further questions for the applicant or any further discussion on this?
I'm just curious, the size of these retailer space, how does that compare to what they have outside in other areas of the market?
Same, they
It says-
follow a prototype,
Okay.
22,500 for TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Home Goods, whatever they are, they're 22,500. Hobby, 50 or 55, they're doing 55 here, so.
Okay.
So yes, these are all, they follow prototypes, every single one of their stores are all identical.
And again, Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the applicant working with us and being interested in bringing these retailers to the city of Delaware.
It's gonna bring a lot of traffic to that area, so. That's why I wanna hurry up and get the other piece of property.
More traffic. All right.
There's plenty of parking though, Jim.
Stop it.
Hey.
Plenty of parking. Okay,
Cool,
all right.
cool. Well, hey, it was a pleasure, thank you very much.
I haven't voted on it
Not
yet.
yet.
Are we voting yet?
I thought we were done, no. I'm sorry. Hey.
So, at this time, are there any members of the public here this evening who wish to speak upon this particular case? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. What's the wish of the commission on this case?
Move to approve item number 2020-0010 with all staff modified recommendations.
Motion by Mr. Badger,
Second?
second by Mr. Halter.
Mr. Badger?
Yes?
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes, motion carries. First reading will be at the council meeting on the 10th. Generally, these will go 3 readings.
I will email the packet.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
and
Thank
good
you very
luck on
much.
the next
Now I
meeting.
can go.
Before you go, Dave, are we gonna just do, it's gonna have, public comment? So we can, that's gonna be a short meeting on the 10th, because we gotta get upstream at 7. So you're gonna do a full presentation on the first reading?
At your pleasure.
Oh,
Madam
it's
Mayor.
Approved on the first reading, that's easy.
No, that won't happen.
I can do it at the second.
We'll let you know.
We can save them a trip.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, we can talk
Let me see
about
what the
that.
agenda looks like, yeah. So it's not the 10th, and it'll be
24th.
24th? So that doesn't mean it won't be read that night, but we may not do the presentation until the 24th, until I see the whole agenda.
So that's the 10th of February? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you and good luck.
No,
All right, moving on to the next item under regular business. Could the clerk please read item B into the record?
Item B, case 2020-0035, a request by the Delaware General Health District for approval of a preliminary development plan for a new office building at 470 South Sandusky Street on approximately 9.4 acres on property zone POI, Planned Office Institutional District.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, on this case, I just say, though we only had 2 applications on this agenda, I think they're pretty impactful to our community. This one in particular, I think the health district needs more room. They're in multiple buildings in downtown. They still would like to stay within the city. We would obviously like them to stay within the city and stay within a core area to serve their constituents to the best of their ability. Obviously, this old Leroy Jenkins site that the city has spent some time and money in the state of Ohio actually as well, in taking down one of the major buildings, which at the time we said was hopefully a little addition by subtraction, and I hope by the application today that's proven true with respect to the health district being on that site. In terms of all the uses that have come forward to us as staff for that site, including hotels, including multifamily apartments, I certainly think that this use in the health district is by far the best use out of all of this. I'm extremely excited to have them bring this forward to you. And I know they're excellent neighbors here. I know they'll be excellent neighbors down there as well, and very appreciative of their continued investment and interest in the city of Delaware. I think this is a great site, and it really provides another anchor institution for the transformation that is happening in the South Sandusky Street corridor between the Delaware Hotel and some of our retailers. And we're very, very close, I think, to fully stabilizing and turning back over what was US 23 at one time through our community. So, appreciate that. Lance, do you want to give the staff?
Yeah, I can. The subject site is zoned planned office institutional, which allows the proposed office use, and as Dave indicated, allows a lot of other more intensive uses. So this is probably the least intensive use that could come out here based on past discussions on this property with other applicants. This is the aerial of the site. It's pretty much vacant. When we tore the building down, a lot of concrete out there. They did keep the Leroy Jenkins house, and they're going to maintain that house. It's going to be for storage as we move forward. This is the proposed site plan. About a 30,000 square foot building, which would be located in the center of the property. You'd have the main access from South Sandusky Street. There's actually a northern curb cut there today, so they'd utilize that curb cut. The southern curb cut that is used today would be eliminated, so there'd be one access point that would extend into about a 215 space parking lot. The eastern parking lot would be for the patrons. The western parking lot area would be for the employees and the fleet vehicles they have. And also there would be a emergency-only access to Magnolia Drive here, and that would have to be built per the fire department requirements, and it would probably be a gravel type composition that they would approve. The entire site would have to comply with the fire department movement requirements, engineering requirements, and any public works requirements. Just want to remind you, this is a preliminary development plan, so that those conditions are fairly general at this point. Pedestrian connectivity, there's a sidewalk along South Sandusky Street that would have to be maintained. The bike path and pedestrian path does not identify any alignment in this area. The 30,000 square foot office building here, there would be a potential for 10,000 square foot expansion just to the west of the southern portion of the building, between the building and the existing house that they would use for storage. And also there's a retention pond on the southern portion of this site for stormwater and the like. The area in this, they'd have a dumpster and other associated maintenance equipment. Those would all have to be enclosed by a fence or enclosure made of brick or stone to match the building. From a landscaping perspective, they would have to submit a comprehensive landscape plan with street trees, front yard trees, interior parking lot, foundation landscaping and perimeter buffering. Along the northern portion of the site and the southern portion of the site, there's existing residents. And our code requires a continuous buffer adjacent to the residence in the form of a fence or landscaping or shrubs and the like. Also, where the parking spaces are, we'd require shrubs where the lights wouldn't protrude into the adjacent residence. There would be several trees scattered throughout the site that appears that they'd be removed. Staff would require a tree survey for the entire site to determine which trees would be removed, which would be preserved, and would have to comply with our Chapter 1168 tree preservation requirements on any replacement that would be required. Any signage would have to achieve compliance with our gateways and corridors plan. Lighting, they did provide a lighting plan, a preliminary lighting plan. Looks like there'd be 11 light poles throughout the parking lot. That would be 20 foot high. The foot candles would have to meet our minimum requirements adjacent to the neighbors, single-family houses to the north and south. The building design indicates about 30,000 square foot. It's going to be a modern design with a shed roof that extends kind of into a gable. The north elevation would be the main entrance into the site, into the building itself. We'd have a stone wainscoting along the frontage and northern elevation in this area. There'll also be some, the main entrance would be double doored and expansive glass, and just bookending that would be stone columns with their main sign. The primary material of the building would be a metal siding, vertical siding with a metal roof, pitched shed roof. As I indicated, the mechanical equipment on top would be shielded by some fencing in that area. It's a pretty modern structure. It would allow, there's a lot of windows on all the elevations, and there are some skylights, so there'd be a lot of natural light into this building. Overall, staff believes the building will achieve compliance with our design code for institutional type use, and we're supportive of the use in this area because the rejuvenation of the South Sandusky Street corridor, this is an important part of it. There's a lot of things that are occurring down there, and this is just another, and this will add a lot of, it's an office use, so you'd have a lot of foot traffic in this area during the day, which would be good for the businesses down there. Staff supports the submittal with 16 conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
How's traffic going to be impacted with only that one way in, one way out? Is there going to be a requirement or necessary to change to include a turn lane or anything on the South Sandusky?
If my memory serves me correctly, this is already a 3-lane section of roadway. So northbound traffic would be able to get out of the through lane and turn into the development. And then southbound traffic would be able to turn. I don't see a need with deceleration being an issue. It's a 25 mile per hour speed limit in this area. So I don't see that need at this time for this development.
I guess, I don't understand the gravel driveway. When we have pretty well tried to stop gravel driveways in the city. I know when Schultz was built, we had them put down like a paving stone where the grass could actually grow up. So it wouldn't look like gravel, it wouldn't have dust. The fire truck could go across it, and it looked like grass. And now we're going back to gravel. So that's my first question. And then is it going to be treated all the time for dust or I mean, there's a code in here someplace, isn't there? Did I miss it? That's my first question. I might as well get the second one out right away too. And any office And retail building, we've had building around here the last many years, as we saw tonight. Metal siding was just not an acceptable exterior. And now all of a sudden, it is. And you can see, you know, we just went over an hour or something, just on the type of brick, or exterior the building would be. And if they would've came in and said, we're gonna build that shopping center out there, and it was gonna have metal siding, I have a strange feeling that it wouldn't have gone over real well. So I'm trying to get in my mind, what makes the difference? Why does one have to be and another doesn't, and they're basically either an office or a retail type building? When Ohio Health built theirs, it was not a metal building, that was an office type building. When the bank wanted to build theirs, a couple of years ago, Huntington, we wouldn't even give them the same color sign they wanted, and the brick and everything else had to be a certain color, and we didn't break away from that at all. So I know we'll sit back and try to hear the reasoning on this.
Question one, on the gravel emergency access drive. Certainly a good point. We've had the EcoStone pavers, we've had asphalt drives with bollards at a minimal width that the fire truck can maneuver. We have had some gravel in other applications and locations as well. I think we're trying to balance, and this kind of goes into question too, we have an institutional use here, in our opinion, not a commercial use or an office use or a shopping center covered by specific design guidelines. We have a site, and we're trying to balance, we know we didn't want a public access point on a Magnolia. We've been kind of down that road, so to speak, before on this site. So to make it emergency only gives the two ways in and out. You make a good point about dust and, you know, us making sure that it's a dustless surface. We've done that with some bigger stone before when we've done this recently. So perhaps that's an option, or the EcoStone could be an option as well. I'd let the applicant address that. Obviously, they're a public agency just like us or anybody else when they're addressing those kinds of things. So we'll let them address that part of it. We could certainly make sure it's dustless surface. Number two, some of the comments that I just made are germane to this, but I think the other thing that struck us here is that the building is set so far back on a big size, a 9.5-acre site. It's not that tall a building. It's really, 14 feet or so, and then you have a roof line, the roof stoop, different things on this building. But it's not that tall a building, and it's set so far back that we were comfortable with recommending approval of this. They do have the wainscoting on there of the stone, so they pick up that element of it. But frankly, with the grade of the site and how far back it's sitting, from the roadways, the general public is not going to see a lot of this building. It's not going to be invisible. It's a big building and it's sitting there on a site. So that's why we were comfortable with recommending this approval. Had it been particularly not an institutional use and not a public use and up closer to the road, we probably would have had a different opinion. We did talk about that with the applicant. In part, this makes sense for their layout to set the building here, but I think they were also thinking about those kinds of things. So, and I think I'd let them address that as well. I think they probably have some thoughts in that regard. Overall, it is a more modern building. That's okay. We've had some modern buildings as well throughout our community. It's not maybe normal, but we have had those. And I think it'd be an interesting and different look down that South Sandusky Street corridor. It certainly, no matter how you stack it up, it looks a heck of a lot better than the Leroy Jenkins building that we ended up taking down, at least at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, but that was built without permits, okay?
Well,
Let us be honest,
yeah.
okay? The city had nothing, it was just,
Well,
because I remember when it was built,
yeah,
not a single state permit, nothing,
yeah.
okay? Yes,
I think it was proud of that.
It was better than what he had built back then, okay? And I'm not concerned about the
Yeah.
site. I'm just trying to
That's how
wrap
we
my
would.
hands around
Yep.
how we're always working at the brick color.
Yep.
And the wainscoting color and all this,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden, boom, because I'm gonna tell you again, I've said it a million times,
Yep.
it's a precedence. Someone come in and say, oh, if it's out of sight, then we don't care.
Yep.
And that doesn't always fly, and you know that.
I know, and
I'm just
Commissioner,
concerned.
it's also not, the other examples you gave were in shopping centers or areas that had specific design guidelines above the base zoning code for those areas, just like the case we looked at. Those have very specific ones at the Glenwood Commons Shopping Center. This does not. It doesn't. It's just a base code application, and so it is a Chapter 1129 design review, and you could make them do all brick through that process. You certainly have the ability to do that. But for those reasons that I describe, I think that this makes some sense on this site and still brings in some of the elements that we would normally require in terms of the stone wainscoting, at least for the portion that most of the public might see on that eastern elevation of the site. And then, you know, the only other thing I'd note for the health district is, boy, we'd sure love it if you took down the old house at some point too, but that's just, I guess, an editorial comment more than anything.
I just remember the design criteria went through at the storage place out there on East William Street.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a lot more than, I mean, that was quite designed, because part of it was gonna be facing the street.
Yeah.
We made them do a lot.
The part facing the street, they got stone, and the rest is all metal.
Well, and that was a,
Facing William, now technically, we have a road that goes down there that services ODOT and us. And technically, it's a road, but we didn't upgrade that side of it, really. They determined to upgrade their main office building a little bit there with some stone wainscoting, kind of like that. But I hear you, I think they're here to discuss those.
Well, the new gas station across the street, the Marathon, I mean,
Again, that's almost in the road
I know.
where it's located.
and it looks good.
And it looks great,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
It
looks
does. It looks
absolutely
very good.
terrific. You know, and part of one of the better looking gas stations in the
Yep.
city of Delaware.
Yeah, they did a nice job.
Yeah, they really did.
And that one, no matter what you did, you gotta see it.
Well, you could, yeah.
That's true.
If you put a pup tent up there, it would look very nice.
Any more questions for staff? Otherwise, I'll have the applicant come forward. Would the applicant like to come forward, please? You could just state your names and addresses for the record.
Good evening. I'm Bill Souders with Moody Nolan Architects, 300 Spruce Street, Columbus, Ohio, 43215.
Pat Lanning, Vice Chair of the Delaware General Health District Board. I'll use our business address at 1 West Meyer Street, Delaware, Ohio.
I might add that we have Moody Engineering representing the civil engineering and the balance of.
Dave Knowlton from the Health Department. We're sorry the commissioner had to leave. We have a meeting in Sunbury tonight for them to join our health district when they become a city, and it's very important we do that one tonight because we have a district advisory committee meeting next in March, and we want to be able to have that approved by that, because the approval will come in after that. We don't want them to be without health services. So she had to leave, and we apologize for that.
No worries.
As Bill mentioned, Jamie Lee's working with Moody Engineering.
What was your name, I'm sorry?
Jamie Leesburg.
So, I'd like to go back and just, for your benefit, look at why the building is where it's located on the site. If you don't mind putting up the original site area. So, there is a 75-foot setback because of the residential, plus the parking is an additional setback. And so you can see where it narrows down at the pinch point. There's only 80 feet there, so there's not enough room to get the building up close to Delaware, South Sandusky. And so, if we were to make the building long and narrow, it'd be almost like 600 feet long, and there'd be no parking up front. So what we did was the first time that we could clear the setback for parking is where we set the building. And so when you do come in off South Sandusky, you do see the main elevation on the east side. But it is fairly deep in the site because to get 30,000 square feet and to be useful, it's basically a square-type building when you look at what internally, all the benefits that they provide the community and how they interact. And so that left the house and then the backside as it was discussed. So that's the primary reason why the building is where it's located. We can go through, I'd like to, if it's all right with you, to go through the 16 points fairly quickly because we have basically no objections to these items.
Oh, you have no objections?
Basically no
Oh,
objections.
well then let's skip to the ones where you do have objections.
Well, we can do that. And to me, if you can explain the difference between number 6 and number 9, are they the same? Is that meant to be the same? Shade trees shall be planted along South Sandusky Street, which we understand. And then number 9, street trees along South Sandusky shall be planted and/or replaced for the zoning.
No, they're not the same. So we require front yard trees, that's technically your front yard, and we require street trees, some of which are there, but may need to be replaced. We don't know that, they're preliminary, we don't know that level of detail yet. At your width,
Okay.
it's not many of either.
Yeah. So we understand that there's, I think for our frontage, there's 3 trees between the sidewalk and South Sandusky that we need to plant. We're okay with that. Basically, everything else outside of where the existing gate is already has multiple trees. We do have the tree report for the final that we'll have. It talks about calibers and replacements and those type of things. So those, now that we understand that part, the house itself, we're not prepared to bring the building up to code, so we would pull out any kind of storage. And so there is a limited budget. It is a public service that we're talking about here, and so money is a critical item, so we would just leave the house the way it is for now. But everything else, we have no issues with. We do like to discuss the landscaping. So item number 7, that's not an issue with us, which is the interior parking lot landscaping and foundation landscaping. The perimeter buffering and for the house, we're fine with that. However, we would provide a planning plan for final, but we would not be able to implement that until after the building is completed, and we're in another year for cash flow reasons.
Yeah, so, our hope is to be able to get this building under construction early summer, about June, if we make our schedule, with a year scheduled for completion. And then what we always had intended to try to do something around the perimeter. We'd be willing to work with a variance to present a plan where we can do that after the building has been constructed and occupied.
And if you start in June, when would the building be completed?
We anticipate a year.
It'll
A
be
year
12
of
months.
construction?
Yeah.
So the following summer, you would anticipate being. Obviously, we don't do landscaping during the winter, which is why I ask you, and we just typically bond that over until the summer anyway, when occupancies happen. Given the vagaries of construction schedules, you may be into that cycle anyway. I think the bigger thing when we wrote that, we felt a little bad in that you have a lot of perimeter here. I mean, a lot of perimeter.
mean, without seeing it,
miles
yeah.
of perimeter here. So, I think our application to that would be strategic. It's about really around the parking lots and blocking headlights. And so, you know, we'd probably ask that perhaps you could focus on those areas initially, and then if you needed to fill in the other areas, I mean, there's another way to do it, which is to do kind of miles of fencing here, which is, I don't know, you're gonna have to tell us whether that's more or less cost effective. We're gonna blow?
I don't know, find my phone alert, I have no idea in the world. Somebody
Find
must
it?
be looking for me.
Okay. It's the fence alarm. So I think it, and it's primarily then on the north side, a little bit on that west side, and just a little bit on the south side. You obviously have open space, the building, the pond on the one side, so. We were going back, reviewing that code, and the purpose of that is really to get some buffering. You've achieved the setbacks, which are significant in the POI district, as you just explained. But then the other buffering is really relative to, you know, traffic and headlights and that sort of stuff. And you kind of have two pods of parking area. So maybe there's a way to, I hear what you're saying about budget and all that. I mean, I work for a public agency too, but.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you're open 8 to 5?
Generally, yes. You know, if there's an emergency situation, a health emergency situation, that we're involved with the rest of the responders in the county, we could have people there later on, but we generally don't do anything after 8 to 5.
Tuesday night, we have clinic till 7, I think.
Yeah,
Okay,
all right.
thanks. So you'd have a few lights. in
Well,
winter.
on certain times of the year, it's,
And you did make mention, you had the engineer's light level study around the perimeter. It's very hard to read at the scale that you have, but when I did zoom in on it, it's basically 0-foot candles at the perimeter. And it's pointing toward the road, so there's no light actually facing to the north. And so it was, with everybody's recommendation, you know, everybody worked to try to make sure that all the lights are cut off at 0. But then we need to have 1 to 2 foot candles for safety once you get into the drive and parking areas, which we were able to achieve with those 11 poles, all LED types. So I think we're trying to meet everything that you've asked for. We did add the Delaware stone to the base of the building. We are going to have that as part of the road sign, as part of that base as well. As far as addressing the metal building, it's as much as ease of construction, time framing, and cost. We can order all of the building components and it arrives on site, and it makes the construction period go a lot quicker. The metal building itself would have a couple of different elements to it, but it is a metal building, but it is one of the most cost-effective. And since it is Delaware's money, you know, I hear the concern about setting precedents, and but I think with a 3-bay inside system, we've got, you know, the goal was to build a building for $150 a square foot, and that's pretty tough to do in today's market, so we came close. So we hope that you would consider that as part of something that we're trying to get a part of your community reestablished and serve the community as best they can. So I know it's not the answer you wanted to hear, but I tried to address it the best I can.
Yeah, the problem is that we have constituents, city of Delaware, that expects us to play by the same rules for everybody, okay? And if I understand right, you know, and that's why I asked Dave about the metal building, and now you're saying that even the perimeter blocking, okay, a lot of houses there, anything else that would have gone in there into a commercial type or even an apartment or whatever, we would have required them to put up the landscaping around the exterior to put a buffer between them and a house, okay? We've done, I can't think of a place we haven't done that, and maybe I'm wrong, okay? And I understand what you people are going through, I really do, but I think the neighbors have a right to expect that no matter who goes in there, okay, that certain codes will not be changed, okay? They should be there. And that's, those are some of the things I'm concerned about.
So are you okay with, we're committing to doing the peripheral buffering, but we're asking to do it at the tail end of the project instead of during the process of the building?
Well, yeah, but how long is that?
Well,
I mean,
we're talking
when you
about
say the
year-
project is done, so let's say it's done in June of 2021, just to give a date,
Sure.
okay? How long between when you do all this, I mean, as Dave said, you're talking about an awful lot of perimeter landscaping, okay? How long do you want to prolong that?
Well, the growing season for planting would be, summer, fall.
Yeah, so
So
you
that
would say
would-
that the building was done, whenever the building was done, either that summer or that fall, you would put all this perimeter landscaping around this thing?
That's what we're suggesting.
I'd like to have us have a discussion about whether we can implement that project over a period of 12 months after we're occupied.
Well, I think that's, once again, I mean, I don't live close to it, so I guess I could say, yeah.
Well, I mean.
Other people do,
I don't
okay?
know.
And once again, we haven't, and correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't allowed this with any other development where they could put it off that far, okay?
Typically
I
not.
can think of one we did, and it's never got done. Okay, and I'm not saying you'd be that way, but it never got done. So, but in fairness to the neighbors, okay, and that's what I'm looking at here, we have a code, and in fairness, if there weren't any houses around you already, I'd say, I got no problem with that. But they are there, and they were there first, and they had to put up with Leroy Jenkins, okay? And I'm sure they were happy when it came down, okay? So now I think, I just want to make sure that those people are protected, okay? And that's what I'm concerned about. And to extend it off a year, as I say, I don't know what the perimeter footage of that place is. Do you know, Dave, any idea?
9 acres.
Substantial.
It's substantial, and it's going to be honest with you, a lot of money.
Yes.
It's going to be very substantial if we have you do it like we've done every other place. Luckily, we probably won't make them mound it. That'll be good.
No, they're not required to do that.
Okay, so you won't have to mound, which will save you a lot of money, but you still have to do some perimeter blocking around there for the neighbors who live up next to you.
Well, we
And
understand that.
I don't know if,
That's our intention to get it
but
done.
if we give you a year, then the next person comes in, they want a year, and then the next person wants a year and a half. And pretty soon that sign gets bigger, as we've all seen, That's my concern, okay? I want to stop the project, but I do have that concern. The rest of this group will decide what they want, but I throw that out as my concern. I don't know if I want to go a year, because I'm not sure you're aware of what exactly that's going to cost you. They may find out.
We're not now.
You may find out that, wow, we had no idea in the world, could we get 2 years? And you've already built, we can't tell you to tear the building down, that's for sure.
I'm estimating close to $100,000 to $200,000, depending on how much is landscape versus how much is fencing.
You may be surprised.
Yeah.
You may really be
Sounds like
surprised
that'd be pretty light.
when you finally get the thing all together and they tell you how close the bushes have to be and how big they have to be. And the type, I think you're gonna be very surprised, but I'll leave it up to the rest of the committee on what it wants to do. And even city council can overrule us, which is no big. We just make suggestions. They're the ones that gotta live it.
Was there another question that you had other than?
No, I was concerned about the building. I was concerned about the gravel driveway because I don't.
That's it.
I don't know that I remember, and if Dave says that we've approved some here as a committee, then I guess we have. I just don't, sure I remember.
I know the fire department approved that, but we're willing to work with you and change that to something else that doesn't raise dust. That's fine.
You're talking about those pavers, I've seen those applications of parking lots for them.
Well, no, the only one I remember right offhand, because we had a long discussion on it, was out at Schultz, when they did an addition on Schultz, not the original building.
Yeah,
but
the country club retirement has a
Yeah.
parking area that has the eco pavers.
Yeah.
It's almost like a cinder block on its side.
Right.
Yeah,
We're willing to do.
For lack of a
That's-
better
That's
description.
fine, we can do something like that,
It might be cheaper to do a 12-foot wide asphalt
Yeah,
drive.
right.
I just, you
We
have to
do-
figure that out.
We would study the cost.
I agree with you.
We'll look at the cost, we did, the suggestion was made, again, it is truly a secondary, if there was an accident or something on Sandusky, that nobody could get there, it would come into from Magnolia, it would be the only town it would be used. We're actually have bollards and signage and those kind of things. There was a question or a request during preliminary meetings about kind of connectivity and bike path, people being able to use it, those kind of things, we went back and forth on that. There's some other things, GeoWeb,
You either have to come to the mic or speak even louder. Sorry. Like part of the consideration here too for us as staff was to make sure we had secondary access, but not be, we'll have bollards and that sort of thing, but not be too inviting for, someone to cut through the site. So it's a tough balance.
Yeah, that was an idea that, again, it wasn't a cut-through. Somebody could use it as an extension of a bike path or for access, that kind of thing. There are lots of different products, the GeoWeb and those kind of things, which is, it kind of expands out, it's kind of a honeycomb thing, and you fill it with stone.
Yeah.
That meets fire requirements. You wouldn't need to lay down for the outriggers or anything else, and it would just be the width of the apparatus. The apparatus actually can move within the site. If you look just west of the building, there's a big loading area, turning area, those kind of things. They don't get many semi-trucks, but again, it can handle a semi-truck backing in there and making a three-point movement and get out. So again, the apparatus can come in, have access to the whole building. This is truly just a secondary access in case there's an accident or something in Sandusky and they had to get in. So again, that's why the idea was not to put a lot of money in something that we hopefully would never need. So, but yeah, we can look at different paving materials or different kind of materials that would meet the fire department's requirement and again, not become a nuisance.
I agree that this could be worked out through engineering and plan review and probably even be more finite by the time we got to final development plan. I can also share that we do have a gravel type emergency access at Communities at Glen Ross 15, but it's temporary in nature. As soon as the secondary access is installed, that drive will be removed. Glen Ross 11 has the permanent asphalt drive that stays and will be used as the multi-use path access as well. So
To be
just to-
fair, where we've done gravel, it's primarily been more in the industrial area.
Yeah.
Uh,
If we've
and
done it for,
Not around residential unless it's temporary.
yeah. And it's usually always specified dustless.
Basically, just use a bigger stone
Or wash stone.
and wide, wash.
So the only other thing that we probably haven't talked about is the city's desire to get an easement. So that's a win-win partnership between the city and this project is that we grant that easement in exchange for the path for our, what is that, for the overflow?
Yeah, and the storm outlet, we would tap into that new storm sewer.
I think that's covered too by condition 1, where it says it includes engineering approvals, including any stormwater utility issues that need to be worked through engineering and utilities department.
So what he's talking about on the south side, there's some stormwater improvements that need, we need to have in an easement.
We need that
It's to their advantage to do that anyway, so we're.
Yeah, so we're just saying we're trying to be partners in everything that we're doing.
On a side note, it's hard to imagine, but even with all that parking lot and the size of the building and including the pond, the proposed site is actually less impervious
Yeah.
than what's currently out there,
Mhm.
not including the former building. So if you add in the building that was demolished into that, we're far less impervious. But, yeah.
And this building has fire suppression?
Yes.
What kind of condition is the current house that's on site right now that's not being taken down? I'm just kind of, and I lead into that, I am surprised that it's still going to be part of a preliminary plan, that it's, that you're gonna try to.
Structurally sound, but, you know, we're under discussion at the board level, to decide what to do with it. You know, a couple of us have made the recommendation, we should consider the demolition of it. Again, that's a matter of timing and money, you know. Whether we can include it as part of this project, I don't know. And I have to, the board would have to make a decision as to whether they even want to consider tearing it down now, rather than at some point later when we felt we had better availability of funds to do that.
Cost estimate was around $90,000.
For the demolition.
It'd be better if.
And mention that to the, yeah, mention that to your board that that's the cost now. If you decide after building, raising it, how expensive that's gonna be to move that equipment in past your new building.
Much better to do it now.
So,
Yeah, I'm a civil engineer, so I understand this stuff.
Mhm.
90,000 with the renovations or 90,000 to take it down?
Take it down.
take it out.
Including, there's a basement and everything else. To take
So you
the
have to
building
fill
down,
it.
to take
Yeah,
the
fill.
footers out, take the basement out.
Do you have abatement?
What's that?
Is there any abatement?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if environmentals have been done out or not.
Well, we need to, have the environmental done, need to have the assessment done to see what, we know there's asbestos gonna be in that building from the age of it, so, you know, we have to decide how much abatement has to be done for asbestos before we talk about it.
Okay. All right, so just recapping, because there was a lot of conversation there. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the point that you have concern about is number 8, correct? Was that the only one, was number 8?
The timing of number 8.
The timing of number 8. Okay.
Everything else we can work with cities.
Okay. Any thoughts from the planning commission on number 8 and postponing, not buffering?
I would not be in favor of postponing the buffering, to be honest with you. I understand it's a cost thing, but that is significant fencing and buffering for all those neighbors, and I would say we'd still follow our typical zoning for any type of building. And it'll be a significant number. I can tell you, at 9.5 acres for the type of buffering, you could hit 6 figures real fast.
It's even half a million. It's roughly 2,800.
I mean, 9, yeah, I mean, yes, 7 figures, sorry, 7 figure real easy.
So we'd have to let the board decide, with that kind of money, the board would have to decide whether there's a project or not.
Yeah.
But it's difficult because we're just at,
That's
we're
fine.
preliminary assessment right now. In the past, we've had other developments, they usually bring a bit more information to us at preliminary, particularly in regards to landscaping type of thing, so without that,
It's
I mean,
the board's decision at this point. I know, I've seen the financials.
but it'd be up to you
It would be
to get
tough.
the estimates, obviously, but I mean, it's.
It would be tough to come back with a
We'll have
project.
to have a discussion about it.
Again, I think it's primarily, when we went back and really looked at the code with respect to this use and this, the way the site lays out, it's probably at least a 3-foot high continuous buffer around the parking lot areas. But then it actually goes up, I think is what we found, around the areas that are not around the parking lot. Again, when we finish our conference plan, we need to review our zoning code as well. Notwithstanding that, then that might be, privacy fence, or it could be some sort of landscaping or something.
But if we approve it, as it stands now, this is just a preliminary.
It's just preliminary, and I
They
think,
can, when they come back with the,
yeah.
final,
Final.
okay? Some of the stuff could be changed because you brought back more information.
Yep.
So it doesn't mean that, I always tell people, nothing's in concrete. It's, we're based on what you've given us, that would be our preliminary, okay? And then when you come back with a final, you'll have a lot more information for yourselves, because now you'll have more cost assessments of what this thing's actually gonna run you, okay? So, I mean, it's up to you people,
The other thing you could do that's available to you is you could seek a variance to the Board of Zoning Appeals to the timing consideration. That's not, they could certainly grant you that with respect to condition here tonight, but I think, again, that Commissioner Halter makes a good point, is preliminary. So as you get more information, we can maybe sit with you again, once you have some numbers, and we can go over the landscape requirements around the perimeter. It's not going to be the same. It's not, a half a mile of continuous, 'cause I think you've got about a half a mile of perimeter here, literally, of continuous privacy fence. It's not, that could be a way to go, but that may not be the only way to address it.
No, I'm concerned about the houses, but then you've got the nursing home. That one not quite as much a concern, so I think, and then even my suggestion would be working with the neighbors. Because there's already some blocking, there's already some there from the neighbors' trees and stuff like this. Maybe there's,
There's a number of existing fences.
I got to say, there may be some type of agreement you can meet with them, because that's who we're trying to protect at that point.
I'm sure that we're gonna work all we can with them.
Yeah, we've already had one public meeting for residents there.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah, because I think, I'll echo some of the comments of my fellow commission members. I think one of the most important roles we have is to protect the residents as well. And I think that's the sticking point for us. I can't speak for the rest of the commission, but me personally, I would leave number 8 as it is, knowing that you have other options kind of in your arsenal of options. And again, it's preliminary. You've got all these other steps you need to go through as well.
Did you hear any feedback from the neighbors in your meeting with respect to perimeter landscaping?
Certainly nothing on the perimeter. We're asking you, they did ask us to take down a privacy fence that was there because it was, we were told there was a lot of exposed nails on it, so we took that down.
Take down a privacy.
That was on the south side. But, rest of it,
On the south.
I went around the whole property and took pictures of the whole thing, and a lot of the areas are not visible, but I agree. There is a lot of exposed area there, and we share your concern. Our big problem is the total cost of the project. I'm the director of finance. I priced it out at $9 million just to get them to consider it. Right now, we're at 10.8 and borrowing $4 million. We don't have the ability to pay back $4 million without doing a lot of skimping and everything right now. And it's going to be difficult to get them to even go along with that. So this puts up a big roadblock for us. And I'm certainly not saying anything about the project. It is a lot of territory. I think I counted over 100 sections of fence if we wanted to buy that. They're $100 a piece or something, and then to get them installed and everything. It's a lot to do, so we share your concern. It's just, we are a public agency, and what can we do is the real question.
Well, we appreciate the feedback tonight. I mean, it's helpful to us as we go on to planning this. We'll have to step back and take a look at this perimeter fencing issue.
Truthfully, all the trees down there are pretty much worthless. They're rogue trees that have just grown from scattered seeds. Clean that up. We'd like to do that too, but there's a lot there, and it's a big project. We want to be a part of fixing that up down there, but there are limits on what we can do, and I know we're stretching them. So we will regroup and get back to you is all we can do.
How does the rest of the commission feel about the metal building? I mean, when we put up our buildings as a city, we have to follow all the guidelines. They have to be brick, they have to be the stone, everybody else. What do the rest of you feel? Because this is gonna come up at council. I heard what Dave said, I understand why, but I want to hear from the rest of you.
I would say because it was zoned, or that's currently zoned POI, that the metal building, I would be okay with, because it is a PO, industrial.
Okay.
It goes
I
planned mixed,
concur.
which is what the city usually gets, a planned mixed development or something other than what it's already zoned. And then that's, unfortunately, we can't change the zoning on that. I wouldn't even suggest that for,
I'm good
It's
because
the
of the
zoning.
setback and how far back onto the property it lies. I don't have a problem.
I know how you feel.
No, I was asking a question.
I know.
I wasn't saying
But
I
nobody
was against
responded
it.
to it.
No, I was not against it. I was asking a question because if it comes up again, a commission has to have an answer for it. Why did you let them and you won't let me? Okay? And Dave gave some very good reasons. Okay, and that's, I don't, many times I ask these questions, it's not that I'm against it. I just want to be able to make sure that we can explain it to somebody else when they come in and they say, I want to do one.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think for me, it's firm but fair, it's, if the use says that they can use that type of material, I think that's fine.
Okay.
I think we're applying things equally. When you look at how we're interpreting number 8, we're applying things equally here. So that's my take.
Thank you.
and last comment on it, as they move forward, even on, like, let's say, the east elevation type of thing, there might be some room to add some architectural just things to break up, over top of the windows and stuff like that, nothing, cost prohibitive, certainly, type of thing, to break up the metal siding look type of thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have anything else for the applicant? Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
At this time, I'll open it up to the public. If there are any members of the public here this evening who wish to speak on this case, if you could please come to the podium, just state your name and your address for the record, once you actually reach the podium. No, you are absolutely fine.
My name's Jeanette Haig, my husband Jim Haig, and we live at English Terrace, right dab in the middle. And we went to their very first meeting and learned of everything they had to say in the beginning. And I'm happy that the health department is going there, I want to say that first. I'm a little surprised from what we heard at the first meeting from what I'm seeing today, because I know you said because it sits off the road, it doesn't matter that it's a metal building, it's in my backyard. I've looked at an empty parking lot. I don't want to look at the back of a metal building. The whole area around it is an old neighborhood. It's not a modern neighborhood. It's going to look like an airplane hangar sitting in our backyard. It's not going to fit with the neighborhood. I'm a little offended. I'm not happy. As far as the fencing, and I'm only speaking for myself, we didn't sit back there and talk because I didn't know all this today. As far as the fencing, right now we have fencing around it. They have fencing around it. It's just chain link, but at least I don't have people running through the back area. It's not a real good neighborhood on the far side of that whole area. I'm not so concerned about trees and shrubs if people can still come through it. I would much rather have a black chain link fence that stops people from coming in. That's where I'm coming from. But as far as the building itself and what it's made out of, I don't like it at all. I've lived there for 22 years. I want to stay there. What do you think?
I understand this is going to be a 9 to 5 building. Our first house is right up against a school, an elementary school, and I at first did not like that, but we were just married in the first house, and it was a great thing. In the long run, it was fantastic. And I think the health department will do the same thing. They're going to be there till 4:30, 5 o'clock, and they'll be quiet. As far as the buffer zone, the noise thing, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't really think that's gonna be such a big deal. I've never lived next to the health department, but do they have that much traffic?
Well, no, let me just say, it's not the traffic always. It's a lot of, it is the landscaping is used to put a buffer of not only traffic, which does help for that,
Visual.
but visual too, okay?
Well,
It's a visual.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up. Like my wife said, the fence, we've been there 22 years, and I'd say our first 5 or 6 years was the worst. As far as teenagers or adolescents jumping the fence, coming through, and sometimes they're walking through like they're going to the store. Other times, they're on a mission. So you're always wondering where they come from, what's going on. All in all, I'm a little upset it's not gonna be a brick and stone place, but I welcome them. I'm glad they're coming through. I'd rather have that than a low-income housing or a high-rise. I just hope they keep the fence.
The north elevation is going to face English Terrace, is that correct? And what is that actually going to be? It's not the back where they bring in semi-trucks, is it? The east elevation faces Sandusky.
Their loading dock is on the west elevation. I mean, obviously, any delivery trucks would have to go around the building to get to the loading dock. But that wouldn't be where they would be unloading and loading.
North elevation where the entry points are, is basically a service area for clients where we do cars, help people with car seat inspections, things like that, so
That's what that
more,
garage
that's more
is.
client oriented.
There's an awning there, just kind of overhang awning, so that while people are.
Yeah, if you're going to speak, we can't hear you for the record, so you have to come to the microphone.
This is all on YouTube, so we have to hear you.
No problem. Yeah, so right there where Lance has got it, so that area has actually got an awning that comes out, so you can pull a car in there, teach people how to put a car seat in and those kind of things, for new mothers and new parents. We don't actually have a loading dock per se with a lower,
Yeah.
back a semi-truck in, those kind of things. They very rarely get semi-trucks, they'll get more panel trucks, those
Right.
type of things. We did design it for the occasional semi-truck in case they get a big load of something, but, again, all of those deliveries and those kind of things would be on the west elevation, which is the one on the bottom there. And it's basically, there's a roll door, the silver square there, and you have two brown doors. Yeah, right there. So that would be, again, where the deliveries would be, and you can kind of see that awning, again, where you pull in, right, where Lance has got it right there. So that's the awning that, again, would be on the north side for, again, just pulling a car in there to teach somebody how to put a car seat in or help, things like that.
One more question. Is this set back farther than it originally was going to be? Was it going to be closer to Sandusky Street when we went to the very first meeting?
That I'm not sure of. I know, I think it's still sitting where it was, but again, as Bill alluded to, we've got a pinch point there. We couldn't get the setbacks on both sides. This was, I think, the first place that we could actually put it.
Yeah.
Now, Pat Blaney, again, originally we had thought we'd put the building closer to the street so it had more visibility, but as we got into the issue of the setbacks and the design of the building to be functional for what we needed and the most effective, basically a square rather than a rectangle fits our needs a lot better. So with the guidance of our architect, we pushed it to the middle of the site.
My other question would be the entrance from Magnolia, the emergency entrance, is that gonna be open all the time?
No.
There'll be bollards.
No, it's not open. It's only for emergency access, so there'd be bollards there, something, if the fire department could roll a truck over or something like that, or a gate they'd have access to.
Like between the two courthouses?
I'm not familiar with that.
Something like that, or if you've seen the white, sometimes like at the end of bike path, you might see those
Yeah.
white
Yeah.
bollards or sticks,
Yeah.
like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public here this evening that wish to speak? You could just state your name and your address once you reach the microphone.
Hi, my name's Tim Napier, this is my wife Holly. We live on the corner of South Sandusky Street and English Terrace. And
What's your physical address?
Oh,
of the house?
440 South Sandusky Street.
Thank you.
Yep. And our concern was the barrier that you had talked about. Like where the cars come in at, that passes right by our house right there. We're right on the corner of English Terrace and South Sandusky Street there. So was that drive moved over that way because of the hill on Sandusky Street to where it's a safety issue for people turning? Is that the reason why they changed the location of the drive?
That's correct. It's an existing entrance, it is at the top of the hill. So there was a large concern about sight distance coming both ways, so that's why we used that existing entrance for everyone on the south side.
Sure, I figured that's what it was, but I just wanted to ask there. So, we're glad to see the health department moving in there, because it could be something a lot worse, like a hotel or something like that, so we're happy to see it coming there. Again, our concern is the barrier of the daily traffic coming through there, and our backyard's right there, and our granddaughter comes over, we don't want a bunch of cars going within 20 feet back and forth, of our backyard. So there is an existing fence there right now with some planking on it, and there's some areas where there's no planking. From my experience, a good part of the fence is in decent shape. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but my recommendation, would be, my opinion would be, if they could at least fill in the areas that are not filled in, and then maybe your trees or shrubs that you're putting in, you wouldn't have to space them so close together, which would save you on cost. But between filling those voided areas in and spacing the trees out, it would be a bigger buffer for that. No, I know, we just, we're happy where we live, and we just want to stay happy.
Understood.
For the record, it's approximately 70 feet from the northern property line to the northern edge of the driveway. So, it'll be 70 feet there. And there's actually a pretty good stand of trees, existing trees, those are all remain. There's just a couple that we need to move. Yeah, again, you can see right there, a lot of those trees and everything else. There's an existing curb cut. It's not, it doesn't meet the width requirements, so actually we're holding the northern edge there and moving south. There's a telephone pole, that's why we centered the thing on the existing, so we're gonna hold the northern edge of that and move south for the 24-foot width, and then return to required. But again, that leaves a lot of those trees that are essentially in your backyard. So that would be, again, buffer from the proposed driveway. Try not to take out any more trees than we need to. There's some really nice big trees along Sandusky on that hill and everything else, but this was alluded to, yes, it was put at the top of the hill for sight distance requirements, those kind of things, with the turn lane there. We feel it's probably the safest location.
Thank you. Like I said, that's our biggest concern, is the traffic and privacy between the residential homes along there and business. So that's all we have.
I have one other thing to say, just because I originally heard maybe a year into the construction, which would, if it started this summer of 2020, it would be, summer of 2021 for the barrier to be completed. I think a year's time, well, we're all in Ohio, we know Ohio growing season is okay, but if it got extended to 2 years or beyond, I think that is a little excessive, and I'd just like to share that.
Appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
By the way, for the record, what you've done with that house is incredible.
It is, by the way. It is quite incredible.
Never mind a wood house.
I can't drive a nail into that wood of that old house. Great construction, but go ahead.
Built to last. Are there any other members of the public here this evening who wish to speak on this case? All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for further deliberation, questions, and/or action.
I don't have any other questions.
I make a motion, we approve 2020 0035, along with all staff's recommendations and conditions.
Motion by Mr. Halter,
Second.
second by Mr. Volnick.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Volnick?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Chairman Simpson?
Yes. Motion carries. Would this be a first reading at the next council meeting as well?
Correct, but discussion may, I'm not sure when it will.
Okay. Okay, perfect,
I will email again.
perfect. Gentlemen, good luck and thank you. All right, moving along to the next item on this evening's agenda, the planning director's report. What say ye?
Okay, got a couple hours of stuff to go over here.
All right.
Bring it
When it's over.
We had a good ninth meeting of our comprehensive plan steering committee last week, making progress on the plan and looking forward to drafting it up and going back out for our final round of, hopefully our final round of public involvement and getting it to city council, hopefully by mid-year. But I think that steering committee continues to be a really amazing committee. I know some of you are on it, and the feedback and the diversity of that group, it's a large group, but the feedback and the diversity is proven benefits to the process, I think. So that's a good thing. I think, Lance, do you want to just mention?
It appears we have 4 items next month for planning commission, probably another extended meeting.
Thank you for the heads up.
They're good. They're good.
Bring food. Bring food, is that what you said?
Bring snacks.
I don't know, one of the applicants might bring food for you, I don't know.
Bribery.
I think that's it for this evening. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, commission member comments and discussion. We'll start this way and work our way around.
So, I don't know if I'm allowed, not allowed to ask it, but what is it called? The apartments that went in on Hauk Road, the ones that we had lots of or extended meetings about, right by the Y. Do we know what the occupancy rate is yet for those? Because I go to the Y frequently with my daughters to go swim, and just for everybody, the traffic's fine on Hauk Road. But I know that they're still building, but I also see people in there, or I see vehicles in there. I'm just curious if we know what that occupancy rate is.
I do not know off the top of my head. They are still under construction. And then off, like with Burr Oak, especially Burr Oak building from front to back, that makes it difficult sometimes to rent up as fast as they would like.
Sure.
But I think I hear all the apartment buildings are that are occupiable are doing okay. But I think as they finish the construction cycle, get out of the winter, I suspect good things. I could try to find out for you.
It's just curiosity.
Yep.
Other than that, love seeing the developments on my side of town, which I live over at Kensington Place, so to see that is exciting. The Seattle, or I believe that's what it's called, apartments seem to be going along really well. You guys are A+. You're doing a great job, and it's a lot of things that are coming your way, so
Well, appreciate
thank you
it.
so much, guys.
Staff we have incredible staff. We do, not just my department, engineering, public works, and we work well together. So sometimes it requires all of us working in concert to make some things happen.
No other comments, thank you.
I have nothing.
Nothing.
I already said too much tonight.
All right, if you say so.
I got nothing, I've already said it.
Good. Well, I do have always something. The Delaware South New Community Authority for Glen Parkway. Is there any further discussion for the next section? Which would be like
Of
a
the
nip
parkway.
of the parkway itself.
Nothing
It could be like
concrete
a
yet.
middle-
I mean, we've discussed that for more than a decade at this point, and conceptually having a middle authority.
Right.
Was the concept. Really because it's all been pretty much development driven.
Yep.
Up to this point, whether it be on the north side or the south side. We haven't really advanced those discussions. Now, there is a piece from where it ends today, near Sycamore Lane, that will go, advance it up to Berlin Station Road, so we have a logic, it doesn't end in the middle of the field like it does
Right.
now, and it connects to the road network, which with the new high school will, I think, that's a good thing for the traffic that's being generated over there. And I think that project is supposed to be started this year, Carrie? I can't remember exactly the timing of that.
I believe it's currently in the design phase. I'm not sure
So
exactly
maybe
where it
started next
stands. Yeah, it feasibly could.
We
be
have
sometime
acquired the
this year.
property to get up to Berlin, so,
I can follow up with capital team and get back to you.
yeah.
Yeah,
It-
so it's just
We
more
have
curious
looked at, you go over the railroad or under the railroad, the engineers have, and,
Yeah.
of course, that'll involve more discussions with the railroad, which are always
Let us know how that goes.
lengthy. I think that maybe going under the railroad might be the preferred route at this point in time. And maybe then bringing Berlin Station Road around to hit it on the other side, rather, there's that jog and the bad railroad tracks and stuff, to kind of eliminate that, but that's just sort of a concept at this point. That's it. Unless you have a $20 million check you want to contribute to that project.
I don't think anybody's
Contributed
holding
enough
on.
on the Glen Parkway.
Yeah. You know, as always, I just want to thank staff and everybody who puts forth all the effort to organize, put these things together, and everybody who drops the boxes off at our houses on Friday afternoon, with probably the promise to get out a little bit earlier. They do that.
That was me at your house this
Oh,
this
was
month.
it?
Wasn't early,
Nice.
it was a little late, but
That's all right. That's
appreciate
all right.
that, Steve.
Appreciate all that you guys do, appreciate this commission and our ability to do the right thing tonight. As hard as it was to say you need to do these plannings, it was the right thing. Probably one of the harder decisions I've made, actually. Can appreciate that as well. That's all I've got. Look forward to seeing you guys here again on March 4th, 2020. Any conflicts, just let Elaine know, and she'll spread the word and the wealth. So we're going to adjourn tonight at 8:47 PM.